Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. Now, y'all know I do a lot of radio around here. I have a lot of people on the show. Very few that I go back as far as I do with this guy, and very few people that are that I like more or less than this guy. He hasn't taken me to the Palestra yet, but we've attended many Preaknesses at Old Hilltop. He's an old school Baltimorean turned Philadelphian, and doing all things Penn State basketball, where they reside in the top 25 these days. Dick Jerardi, our old friend from, should I say Rogers Forge? Is that fair to say Rogers Forge?
Armagh Village, Rogers Forge, all good with me, Nestor.
Longtime Philadelphia Daily News scribe, longtime Triple Crown and horse racing aficionado. But now, like, your real passion was always on college basketball, right? Like, how did you land the Penn State gig before we get to talking about the upstart Nittany Lions of State College?
It's interesting. I was up there one weekend for a football game, and Ed DeChellis had been just named the head coach. And I said, why don't I go talk to the basketball coach and find out why it's never really worked at Penn State? and
I've often wondered the same thing. I mean, I've been wondering for 30 years, right?
Yeah, and he was a student, a graduate. He was an assistant coach. He'd gone to East Tennessee State, done really well. Now he's back at Penn State, so let me talk to him. So we talked, had a good conversation. I didn't think much of it. I wrote a story. Not long after, I think he called me and said, look, you know anybody who might be interested in a color for men's basketball? And I thought about it. I wasn't really thinking about it myself. I gave him a couple names, and then somebody else called me and said, hey, would you be interested? I said, hey, I'll think about it. Let me know. This was the fall of 2003. And then the following fall, somebody from the school called me and said, hey, we'd really like you to do it if you could. And that's how it happened. So I've been doing it this is 16 seasons.
It's incredible. And, I mean, you live in Philadelphia.
Correct.
The back and forth part of it and watching gobs and gobs and gobs of bad basketball, right? Like, much like watching the Orioles, where most years, most times, you feel like, yeah, they're not going to make any tournament. They might make an NIT, whatever. But to see this thing really grow and become something, and I know it's been a rough week at State College, rough weekend for Maryland as well, but we're really getting into something here a couple weeks from now where we get the Big Ten tournament, and clearly there are going to be people gathered around campus watching a basketball team with potential, right? I mean, you're closer to it than I am. You tell me.
Yeah, no question. It's been great because, look, it's been a very difficult journey to get to this point. Now, Coach DeChellis' last year was 2011, and they actually made the NCAA tournament, played Temple, lost at the buzzer out in Arizona, and he had 4 seniors, including the all-time leading scorer in school history, Taylor Battle. And as everybody in Maryland would know by now, he then decided to basically kind of downsize his coaching career. He went down to Navy, didn't want to be in the rat race of major college basketball anymore. And he and his wife, Kim, have done really well down there, and I think they're really happy. But that opened the door for Patrick Chambers to come from Boston U, and he's a Philly guy. And what Pat has been able to do for the first time in Penn State basketball history is get the program a recruiting niche in Philadelphia. And not only a niche, but they become a major player. They're in with one of the best programs in the state at Roman Catholic. They're getting players out of there, and all of a sudden they become a place that Philly kids, which is where all the best basketball players are in the state, are going to consider, where in the past they would not have considered it at all. And this is really the culmination of almost a decade's worth of work, where they now have an older team, 2 senior starters, a lot of experience, 9 deep, fast, and good enough to compete for a Big Ten championship. And it's certainly the first time that's happened in all my time. And that's a tribute to the coaching staff and the players. And they got a genuine star in Lamar Stevens, who's going to, I think he's 69 points from setting the school scoring record. He's going to be over 2,200 career points. So that's really how it's happened. It just develops very slowly, but this is the payoff this season.
Rough week, though, right? Rough when you start losing. I mean, Maryland didn't lose for a month and a half.
Yeah, no, they'd won 8 in a row. The Terps had won 9 in a row. And what happened to Penn State was they were continuing to win without their second best player. Myron Jones is a sophomore. I would call him a shooting guard slash point guard. He can do either. Best 3-point shooter in the Big Ten, averaging 14 a game. Well, he's been gone for 5 games. They managed to survive pretty nicely with him for the first 3, won all 3, but then it really caught up to him last week. Their 9-player rotation was down to 8. One of the players in those 8 really wasn't playing very well, so they're basically down to 7. And look, they could have beaten Illinois. They had a chance late. Indiana, they actually outscored Indiana at one point on Sunday from 30-5 over the end of the first half to the second, but they just ran out of bodies. So I think the week was as much due to the lack of having one of their best players as anything else, but that's the nature of it. He's got a virus. They're hoping to get him back soon, but they have missed. They missed him all through, but they managed to cover it up for 3 games. The last 2, they just haven't been able to. They just haven't been able to score.
Dick Jerardi, sports historian of all things, Rogers Forge and Old Hilltop on the way to Philadelphia, where he spent a lifetime. How many years were you at the Daily? Were you there for like 30 years? I mean, you left the sports. We were colleagues at Sports First, I should say, and the News American in 1984 briefly. But you must have done 35 years in Philly now, right?
I've been here since 1985, so yeah, and I worked at the paper for 33. I got out full-time in December of 2017. I still do some stories. I'll do 30, 40, 50 a year. But, yeah, at 33 years, 7,000 stories later, it was
time to go.
It was some run at one of the great sports papers in America, the Philadelphia Daily News. It was an awesome place to work.
Well, there's no doubt about it. And you land this Penn State gig, and now they're in the top 10. But, I want to go a little backwards or a little sideways on this because you mentioned Roman Catholic, and I think about, Reggie Jackson back in the day, and I think about the first intern I ever interned with at the News American was a Roman Catholic graduate that went to Loyola. I know that Fang Mitchell would always be pulling kids out of Philadelphia as well, and all those great Philadelphia accents and the Jim Lynam and whatever. But Kobe Bryant, as much as that's a basketball story, a pop culture story, I was sitting in a Cuban cafe in South Beach about to set up for Super Bowl on that Sunday when Kobe Bryant died a month ago now. That's a Philadelphia story, right? I mean, a huge Philadelphia story in a lot of ways with his father and background and all of that. And you talk about Philadelphia as a basketball town or a place where Penn State didn't recruit. But Philadelphia's, long storied history of basketball, and one day you'll take me to the Palestra, right?
I absolutely will. And, yeah, certainly when Kobe died, it was first and foremost a Los Angeles story because obviously he played for the Lakers for 20 years. But secondarily, a Philly story because obviously his dad played at Bartram High and then at LaSalle, and Kobe played at Lower Merion, which is in the suburbs, but he was one of the legendary high school players in the area. They won the state championship his senior year. And
did you go out and see him dribble when he was a kid? Did you get a chance to do that?
I saw him play in high school twice. I saw him actually.
And you remember it. I mean, I guess that would
absolutely.
say, I remember the time I walked into Dunbar, and watched them play Lake Clifton, believe me,
Yep. Oh, no. I can definitely remember it. I knew who they were playing. That's interesting. One of the games was against Coachville, whose star player was Richard Hamilton, who obviously had a great career at UConn. So I saw them as, I want to say, high school juniors. Yeah, you knew. It didn't take a genius to figure out. I didn't know Kobe was going to be an all-time, but you knew he didn't probably need to go to college. That was fairly obvious.
For you with the Terps and where they are and what Penn State represents and the Terps sort of being in the way, strangely enough, and now they've lost, which, I wish the Ravens would have lost one of those games in December. They probably wouldn't have lost one in January, At some point you want to lose one. But, man, when we're sitting around all day on a Sunday watching awful preseason baseball games and waiting for the game to start on a Sunday, and you're talking about, one seed, and I'm thinking, I've been watching Maryland since Lefty was going to make us the UCLA of the East, and we didn't sit around talking about one seeds a whole lot, once or twice during Gary's time. the Big Ten tournament sort of looms large in the double bye and, all that it represents. But for a Maryland to win that and go in as a 1 seed, do you think they're that strong? I mean, it feels to me like everybody's a little thin, but there's no powerhouse anywhere. All the top teams lost over the weekend, including your guys, right?
No, I think that's accurate. I think it's a year where if you have a really good team, not even close to a great team, you can consider yourselves as a Final Four possibility because there just isn't that team out there to say we can't beat that team. So to your point about the Terps, when I saw them in early December, they were up at Penn State, and admittedly at that point their schedule was brutal. It was right at the end of a 2-week stretch where they had like 5 games. So they didn't look great to me that night, and frankly, they've been like the kings of the close wins all year, and that's living dangerously. And now they've caught the hardest part of their schedule at the end of their schedule. So they're 2 games in front, so they probably will get there, but there's 5 teams that are 2 behind them, so they can't afford to lose too many more. But they got every game they play now from here to the finish line is losable because they're at Rutgers in Minnesota and they're home against Michigan and Michigan State. And those are games in this league, they're all, you say, what, no games are a cinch. Other than maybe Northwestern and Nebraska, like everybody else is relatively close. So, yeah, look, Maryland's had a great year, and it'd certainly be fun if they could win the regular season and get the 1. But, man, there's very little difference in, say, like the top 8 to 10 in the Big Ten. I've never seen a league quite like it. I think there's people who are saying, like, it's this great league with all these great teams. I don't think that's accurate. I think it's a league where everybody's really close. And there's some very good teams, and a couple of them are going to get hot in March and make a run, maybe even to the Final Four.
Dick Jerardi has been my friend most of my all of my adult life, because, hell, you met me, I was a kid. I was 15. And we're both 15 still at heart. He has covered the Ponies forever in Philadelphia. He's covered college basketball and the Palestra. He's been promising to get me up there. I guess I have about 3 weeks left here. You and I got to work on our schedules at the end of this conversation. Hang on the line. We'll try to figure something out. But with the Terps, what do you make of this particular group? Boy, Turgeon gets beaten on a lot, and to your point, they play a lot of close games. They were always playing from a dozen behind early in games, even against Fairfield and some godforsaken teams early in the year. Do you think they're a little engine that can? Are they a team you don't want to see in March?
I wouldn't have said that a month ago, but I didn't see the improvement that Jalen Smith was going to have. Now, I did not see the game yesterday. I was traveling.
It was not his finest hour, by the way, on Sunday. Yes.
I saw the box score. It didn't look great. But he's been on an incredible run. And now all of a sudden Wiggins is starting to make some shots where he couldn't make anything for the longest time. And Ayala's occasionally making some shots. But and Cowan is what he is. You don't want to be close at the end because you'll probably find a way to win the game. But I don't see a particularly deep team. I don't think that really matters in the NCAA tournament because the timeouts are like 4 minutes long. So I don't think that's a huge problem. I don't really, but I see a long run for them. But if they made one, would I be completely shocked? No, I wouldn't. I think that Mark has done a great job because I think when I look at their talent, I don't know why they were a top 10 team when the season started, and I thought they were overrated. So in my mind, I think the coaching staff has done a great job to get them to the point where they are. I know people probably down there look at it the other way because they were so hyped, but I think they've overachieved when I look at their talent versus who they play against.
Yeah, for you with the Bleeding Heart Maryland thing and the ACC and Duke and Carolina and all that stuff, there was a point on Sunday. I was watching my pal Peter DeLutis, and he's half my age to some degree, and but still remembers the ACC and was born up with all that stuff in his as a kid. I was watching it, and in the second half of the Ohio State game, and I thought, this is missing nothing. This is an exciting brand of basketball. These are good teams. These are schools with a lot of money and a lot of program, and you're not getting off the plane in Greensboro and Tallahassee anymore. You're going to these campuses where all these football programs are enormous. Dude, you've been at this, going on 2 decades before Maryland was in the conference, right? And getting off planes in Nebraska now and Northwestern and Wisconsin and Iowa and these places. It is a pretty good brand of basketball. I think, you just spoke to whether it's what the Big East used to be or the ACC or whatever. Nothing's like that anymore, right? The ACC isn't like the ACC anymore when you get right down to it, if you were still back in it. But for Maryland fans to be at the top of the heap, where Michigan State's down a little bit, Indiana, some of the sort of storied programs of the Big Ten, and to have an opportunity to sort of put their foot down, maybe even recruiting-wise, if they were to get to a Final Four this year, this is not a bad spot to be a Terps fan, to be a basketball fan on a lazy Sunday in February, to be watching some pretty good basketball.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I wouldn't want to speak for Maryland fans. And look, we were all used to playing Duke and North Carolina and North Carolina State. I get all that, Virginia. Look, it was an economic decision. We all understand why the decision was made to move to the Big Ten. But the caliber of basketball is not any different than the ACC. And in fact, this year it's actually better because the ACC is way down. But yeah, every game you play on the road, they're huge crowds, and they're for the most part, big state universities. And yeah, it's similar in very many ways to the ACC. It's just different because that's not what people were used to. Now, look, do I see Maryland and Nebraska making a lot of sense in basketball? I don't. But all these leagues are like that. I mean, West Virginia's closest rival in the Big 12 is in Ames, Iowa. I mean, that's what it's come to. It's all about money. These leagues have nothing to do with geography anymore. It's all about cash. So, but yeah, I think you're right. If you're sitting at home, you're saying, boy, a game in Columbus, Ohio against the Buckeyes, or a very good team, is not dissimilar to watching a game against North Carolina State back in the day that Terp fans watched forever.
All right, I got to get some ponies out of you, and then we're going to figure out this Palestra thing here. Kentucky Derby hopefuls, but, I think for all of us, look, the Orioles only have 2 years left on their lease. The Preakness thing, you and I have spent 20 years now on Baltimore radio. Every year you coming in here the third week in May, and I'm like, hey, Dick, is the Preakness still going to be in Baltimore? I was down at Gulfstream scouting Super Bowl locations about 6 weeks ago. I drove through a Gulfstream. You been to Gulfstream lately, dude?
I have.
It's insane. They've built like a mall around it. It's insane.
I can't even see the racetrack.
It's insane. I had no idea what's. But when I think, those are the same people that own this thing. They're not doing that here. What will become of this? I'm sure you saw the beautiful glass structure on the hill with the outdoor sort of park feel that they want to turn the grandstand into. My dear friend Bill Cole from the city council has been on. We've talked to all sorts of pundits. I'm doing Baltimore Positive and very into the marathon. We got Sheila Dixon coming on in 2 weeks, as well as all the mayor candidates. This is a hot topic, maybe not as hot as you and I or being horse racing people would like it to be, but what do the industry people think is going to happen around here?
I think they're hopeful that everything that people are talking about can find a way to happen. I don't know the finances or any of that. I've certainly read about it. Look, I want the Preakness in Pimlico. I want the Preakness in Baltimore. That's where it belongs. And obviously it can't go on at the present structure. It's just not feasible. At some point that place has to go. So they have to figure out what is it they want to do. This plan sounds perfectly reasonable to me, but I don't know the politics of it. But yeah, I'd love to see it happen. I don't want to come to the Preakness somewhere other than Pimlico. I just don't. That's what I grew up with. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, you saw the Colts leave once, man. You can't have that happen, right?
That was enough. Yeah, that was sufficient for me. I don't need any more of that.
Which horse is Baffert going to run this year and win?
Well, he's got a bunch of them.
I knew he did.
As usual, there's a horse called 1,000 Words that I really like. But I'm going to give you a name of a horse who's run only once. It's going to sound a little like Justified 2 years ago.
Okay.
The name is Charlatan.
Charlatan.
Ran last Sunday.
Charlatan's running the country right now. Oh, no, different Charlatan. I'm sorry. Hold on.
There's that. Yes, maybe he was named after that guy. But the horse ran just like Justified did his first start, was absolutely brilliant. Got a 105 Beyer speed figure. So I texted Baffert. I said, is this Justify the second? He texted me back. He says, I don't know, but we're going to find out. So that's a horse to keep an eye on. He'll only probably race twice more before the Derby, and everything will have to go right. But let's put it this way, Nestor. After he ran that one time, I might have gotten a hold of a friend of mine in Vegas to see what the number was at the Future Bowl.
You might have
done it.
You might have
done it.
Well, you know, and this is vaguely familiar because this is true. 3 years ago, you did this, and
2 years ago.
2 years ago, excuse me.
Yep, that's right.
You were the first one. It was right around. It was Super Bowl. The Eagles had just won the Super Bowl, and I called you, and your kid was running around in his green underwear, as I remember it, right? And you talked to me about what it meant to be a Baltimore slob, sitting in Philadelphia your whole life, waiting for them to get happy, and they're greasing poles. That was the conversation where you gave me the horse, right?
I gave you Justify. Yes. Now it happened like middle of February, just like this horse. Now is history going to repeat itself? I don't know, but I will tell you this: it was an unbelievably dazzling debut from this horse. So we'll see if he can emulate Justify from 2 years ago. To be determined. But yeah, that's a horse to keep in mind. Charlatan. He's got another one called Nadal, named after the tennis player. I mean, he's even more loaded than he usually is. He's got 5 of them at least that could end up in the starting gate in Kentucky.
Well, it's not a third weekend of May in Baltimore. Bob Baffert's not around here.
Of course not.
Poking the ponies. Dick Jerardi is my man. He is up in Philadelphia at the Philadelphia Daily News, still writing in writer in residence, writer in retirement. What do they call you? Out to pasture? What do they say about you?
All of the above.
And running around with Penn State and hoping to go on a little journey. Well, good luck to you Nittany Lions up there roaring in the Big Ten, and we'll see you out in Indianapolis in a couple weeks for some Big Ten basketball, all right?
Absolutely. Thanks, Nestor.
Dick Jerardi, my all-time favorite up in Philadelphia doing the ponies and doing, at some point, taking me to the Palestra to see basketball, hopefully some Big Five ball. I've never been to the Palestra. I'm getting to this point now at 51 where I got to start crossing off some of these bucket list things that I have not gotten done. I will get there at some point. I got to get to Bloomington, Indiana, and see a basketball game. I got some things I got to do. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. We're talking about cheating in baseball. We are talking about the Terps. We are talking about the Ravens at the Combine in Indianapolis. We're certainly doing some Baltimore positive as well. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.